Hello, this is Raymond Nomizu of Clinical Research IO, or CRIO. CRIO is a leading e-source, e-regulatory, and CTMS system for clinical research. We recently launched a forecasting module to help sites with financial planning. One of our clients who is extremely helpful in designing this is Dr. Jim Clark, owner and medical director of Charlottesville Medical Research in Charlottesville, Virginia. Dr. Clark will be discussing the importance of forecasting, how he's used forecasting in his own practice, and how the CRIO system helps automate that in a seamless yet disciplined manner. Even if you're not a CRIO user, you should be able to get something out of this webinar, as you'll be able to get insights into what makes for a good methodology in doing forecasting. So Dr. Clark, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate all the help you provided in developing the forecasting module.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to us a bit about what forecasting is and why it's important?
Sure. So forecasting is determining payments that are expected based on work that has not yet been performed. It's important because it tells a company how much money it will eventually have, which helps better financial decisions based on available cash flow. So for example, if we know how much money we may have 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months from now, we can look at making capital improvements, equipment purchases, and even hiring additional staff. But to get the best financial picture, you need to know, of course, your expenses, but you also need to know your overall income. The challenge here is that typically most systems don't have all the available income. So we have, of course, payments received, and we have accounts receivable, which are payments expected based on work performed. But what most systems don't have, but CRIO does, it has a forecast payment, which is payment expected based on work not yet performed. So having all these numbers is important as it gives you a complete financial status of the future.
Got it. All right, so tell us a bit about how CRIO does forecasting, and this reflects, I believe, your own methodology. And as you go through that, what I'll do is I'll share my screen and pull up some of the pages from our system. So if you want to start by walking us through what a good methodology is.
Absolutely. So again, most financial software programs, including CTMSs, do not include payments expected for work not yet performed. CRIO does this, and it does it really well. So to forecast income, 2 assumptions have to be made. First, your retention rate. So retention rate is the percentage of subjects expected to be seen for their next visit. The second thing that needs to happen is you have to assume or make assumptions on how many subjects are to be enrolled in each subsequent month. Now, we know that assumptions are not perfect, but because they're based on historical data, they can be fairly accurate. So what happens is you have your assumptions, you make them, you enter them into CRIO, and then CRIO does the rest. Based on study budget, CRIO calculates how much each visit will generate. And then based on study visit windows, CRIO calculates when each visit is to occur. CRIO then reports how much money, both total as well as per study, we'll have for every month going forward. And prior to this, we never really knew the true picture. We knew how much money that we had made that came in. We knew how much money we were expecting to make based on work done, but that's only a small part of it, because work that we haven't done yet is far greater than our accounts receivable. So we're truly losing a lot of the information to make our best decisions going forward. The nice feature about CRIO is it also auto replaces any assumptions. So for example, if say 3 months from now, we feel that we're going to enroll 6 subjects in that month, but when that occurs, and if we only enroll, let's say 3 subjects, then CRIO auto replaces that assumption. So now it shows the information based on 3, the real number, versus our assumption. So as time goes on, of course, the information becomes even more accurate, because now the assumptions are replaced with actual data, but you still have information going forward that you have to make those assumptions. So it's very user-friendly, and allows us, again, to see where we are going forward.
That's right. So right now I'm at a section in the forecasting tool where you input the number of screenings that you expect to have in the future months. And so, as you said, if September passes, we might have forecast 2 at the outset of September, but then we actually did say 3, we did better. CRIO would disregard the 2 because it's no longer applicable, and then it would take the 3 enrollees as givens. And so those 3 patients would now be
Absolutely.
actual subjects, and there would be a forecast set of visits associated with those 3. And
Right.
then you can go through and you can modify your future assumptions at any time based on information that you've received so far in terms of your performance and projected forecast for projected enrollment close date.
Correct.
Yep. And let's talk a little bit about the retention rate. So in the CRIO system, 100% of all subjects are assumed to complete V1. And in this hypothetical example, we assume that 80% go to V1A and 50% go to V2. So essentially, this is modeling basically the randomization and completion rates on the study. And it's going to apply this percentage probability to the revenue associated with that visit. So what we're doing is we're probability weighting the financial events in the future.
Correct.
And do you, in your forecast, find that you might have studies that have different screen fail rates, different completion rates? Without this, it would be hard to just sort of assume peanut butter that you're going to get 100% of all visits. But does this allow you to fine tune that a little bit?
It does. So you really have to, of course, look at your historical data based on maybe previous studies that are similar. And of course, as time goes on with that study, any assumptions you've made, you can go in there, which we do on a regular basis, and we may make adjustments based on what has already occurred at that point in the study.
Yep. Now, one thing that we did when we designed this was we assumed, for instance, if a new patient was to come in next month, say it's October, so next month, we would then apply these probabilities of appearance, or probabilities against the forecasted visits. But let's say you had a patient that already randomized, all right? They've already in visit 2, they've completed it, and their next visit is scheduled for V3. We would not take 45% and multiply that to the $600. We would instead take 90%, which is 45 divided by 50. In other words, they've already made it to V2. They're already in, so we can't apply 45%. We have to apply the implied drop-off rate, which is 45, or 5% will drop off out of the 50. So therefore, 90% probability of that subject completing visit 3.
Right, and that calculation is going to give a more accurate result. Correct.
Yeah. And one other thing that we did in our system is we allow you to put in the dollar amount for each of the visits here in this column. We, of course, display what you put into your budget. So you have your base amount, your screen failure amount, and then you have contingent procedures. In this particular case, you've got a variety of procedures that collectively add up to, say, $365 if you were to perform all of them. But we're going to let you put in manually an amount. So how do you utilize this discretionary functionality?
So most of our studies don't have a lot of invoicing, and so of course the numbers are going to be equal to the budget that we've already put in. But we'll calculate that, and then we'll take that and subtract that from the actual study budget. Because again, the main purpose of this module is to give as clear a picture into the future. And so if you are going to have, of course, invoice expenses, you're going to have to take that out so that you can account for that. So we do that as we set that up at the beginning of each study.
I see. Okay, so in your case, if you know that you're going to get reimbursed for an X-ray, but you also know you're going to have a cost, are you going to put the net amount in as your forecast revenue? So you just
Correct.
take out the, okay.
Correct.
So rather than do the gross amount and then separately calculate the costs, you're just going to put in the net amount, net of any third-party procedures that you know you're going to have to pay out.
Correct. And it all depends on how you set your overall spreadsheet, which I'll talk about in a moment. If you've already accounted for that, if you haven't, then obviously it has to be accounted for either in the forecasting module or in the expense aspect of your spreadsheet. So it all depends on how you set that up.
Got it. So it gives you flexibility, and we purposely allowed individual users to manually put in the amount. That way you can judge how you want to handle expenses, what assumptions you want to make around contingent procedures, even what assumptions you want to make on a screen fail ratio, because that can influence what you're going to get. Okay, and those are basically the key assumptions behind this, and then the system will then apply the timing to that and then roll that up into the forecast as you described. Terrific. So walk us through, I guess, the rest of the methodology here. So this will handle the revenue side of things, and then you're mentioning also an expense side of things as well.
Right. So just to complete this aspect, so we enter all of our enrolling as well as maintenance studies into the CRIO forecasting module. So obviously for enrolling studies, you have to enter the assumed retention rate as well as a number of subjects you anticipate to enroll. With the maintenance studies, we're just putting in the retention rate, of course, also the cost that you just mentioned. And again, you can modify those retention rate enrollment numbers as time goes along, as you've learned more information on that study. So then what we do is monthly, we generate that forecast income report that you just showed.
Mm-hmm.
And then we take all of our expenses, and this is on a separate spreadsheet because it includes the expenses which we're getting from our QuickBooks. It includes received income, which we could either get from CRIO or we transfer that into QuickBooks. And then we take that forecasted income and we enter that into a single separate spreadsheet. By doing such, it gives us a complete financial picture of every month. So I can tell you 5 months from now how much money we expected to be brought in, as well as the expenses that we've already put into our budget early on, and that can tell us, where we are in regards to cash flow, making decisions, taking on additional studies. So it really gives a really broad picture of where things are going. Not just now, which we already have, but also into the future, taking account work that we have not yet done, but we know we're going to do.
Yeah. And what assumptions do you make about the translation of that income to cash? Because as you know, the sponsors can be notoriously late in making payments. Do you just make a 2-month assumption in terms of cash lag?
Exactly. So 2 months. So we'll take all that information and we project it for 2 months from the day. Of course, if there's 1 or 2 studies that we may have unfortunately negotiated longer terms, we'll put that into account for those 1 or 2 studies. But for the most part, we're getting our payments within 60 days. So money's generated or occurred in October, then we're going to go ahead and estimate that we're going to receive that in December. So again, we have that best picture is what we're trying to create.
Yeah. And so you said this is a monthly process. So every month you're updating the forecast. So each month it'll probably get more and more accurate as December approaches. But I assume you're pushing it out further out as well. Do you still have a 6-month or 12-month view?
Well, obviously, as you go further and further, the information is going to become not as accurate, and you're not going to be putting in some studies that you may be getting now. Sure. That's going to make up for that lower income, say 6-12 months from now. So we look at it really closely within the next 6 months. And doing this as long as you've had this module, I can tell you it's a very simple process. So when you're playing CFO or manager, it's just you're thinking this is yet another spreadsheet or task you have to undertake. But the whole process is very, very quick. And second, it's very accurate. We don't have to. We're not surprised as each of those months come up. Of course, we've made some adjustments. The only inaccuracy may be in myself in estimating. Okay, we're going to see 5 new subjects each month, and it may end up being 3 or maybe end up being 8. But that's the only quote unquote inaccuracy is my own assumptions. Right. But as you said, we get smarter as time goes on. All of our studies, but specifically with that study, because you know how easy or maybe more difficult you're looking at screen fails, so you're going to be getting less people in. So, but once you have that information in, again, it's easy and it's very accurate.
Yeah, the range of uncertainty probably declines as the study progresses because you can get that feedback loop in. The only other big contingency might be studies get discontinued. Right. So you lose that revenue stream sometimes without a lot of notice.
Correct.
But I don't think there's anything you can really do to forecast that. Great. So you talked about some of the benefits. Can you elaborate on that? I mean, you had told me earlier that this can even help with, say, employees, with bonuses, with taxes. Feels like it feeds a lot of different decisions that you have to make.
Right. I think if you're trying to make your financial decisions based on your status at that moment, you're going to run into a lot of problems. So if we talk about, for example, maybe bonuses or purchases, and today we know our cash flow based on the reality of today, you make those purchases, which could be quite large. 3 months from now or 6 months from now, you had that information to predict where you're going to be. And if at that point you're moderately lower, you may not have made that right call at that time. So forecasting creates a very clear financial picture, which allows for better decisions, not only now, but more importantly in the future. So we use it in a lot of capacities. Yes, as I mentioned, when we can make our purchases. We do this because we know how much money we're going to have into the future and in future months. This really helps, especially if you're a site that maybe money's tight at times. You'll know exactly what month you're going to run into some difficulties. So with that, you can begin to prepare. So hopefully you minimize that problem. Second, we estimate our P&L this way for the year. So that helps with tax estimates, so that if we know that we're going to have a large profit, we may want to start to make some expenses now to reduce our taxes. And again, I can't have that information just for today. I need to know the next 6 months. If it's June, I need to know what we're going to do for the rest of the year so I can better make that decision. The third thing we use it for is, as you mentioned, as I mentioned earlier, is bonuses. We pay out various bonuses to the clinical staff, the recruitment staff, and it's a very good bonus system. But again, we want to make sure that we have the right cash flow to make that decision, or to do that now versus maybe at a later time. The fourth thing we use it for is it allows us to know, will income go below expenses? So you know your expenses, which are relatively stable. Income is what's going to vary the most. And so as you project 4 or 6 months from now, and you see a certain month that it's going to go below expenses, then you know you're going to need to start doing some things now, hold on to some money, look at some different studies, which is the last thing we use it for, which is sometimes you have to look at studies and go, okay, this might not be a study we would take. It may be either a smaller study or a study that doesn't have as good a budget. But if I know in the next 6 to 7 months, there may be a little bit of financial challenges, it may be a better idea to take that study, or it may be a time where I want to take a study that I know may start around that time. So again, from a business development standpoint, if I know my finances, I'm better able to select and make those decisions. Again, having the whole picture and not just payments I've received or accounts receivable. So it is truly the thing that's been missing, and I'm just so thankful that CRIO has put that together. It seems like every system should have it because it's so important. So, and it's worked very well for us.
Yeah, that's a good point, because especially for business development, you could have that cash gap for a couple months, and then that might make you think differently about a study that ordinarily wouldn't be that attractive. But if it's, maybe only 30,000 revenue, maybe that's exactly what you need to cover that gap.
Right, where I may not have wanted to take that study, but now I realize it could serve a financial need for us right now.
Right.
It's good to reach out to even some of the smaller studies, so it's a win-win for us.
Yeah, and certainly doing everything that is being done in CRIO and an Excel spreadsheet would be probably very time-consuming. Must have been quite time-consuming for you before.
It was, and as we talked about before this, I was doing all this myself. It was a lot of calculations. The spreadsheets were quite long and cumbersome, but this has been great. I spend probably once it's set up, and you can do that yourself. You can have whoever setting up the study budget, because they're in that same module. Yep. They can go ahead and add that information. I tend to like to do it myself because the person doing the budget may not have a good idea on screen fails and number of people enrolling. So I do that, but that process may take half an hour setup, and then once a month we look at the numbers, we adjust if we have to, and it's really that final spreadsheet data that I spend time so I can make some better decisions.
Yeah, and there's one other benefit to forecasting for people that are thinking about exiting the business and selling it. Any new buyer is going to look at the forecast. That's going to be extremely important.
Absolutely.
And that forecast can absolutely impact the valuation that you get today.
Right.
And almost all of the networks that I've spoken to that do acquisitions will require some kind of a forecast in their due diligence process. And will adjust the price. So knowing what your forecast is and being ready to give that to a potential buyer, I think, is another positive.
Right.
Just makes you sort of exit ready at all times.
Exactly. Yep, you're right.
Okay. All right. Well, Thank you so much, Dr. Clark. That was a very helpful summary of the forecasting. And as I mentioned before, we wouldn't have been able to build it out quite as well without all of your input. So appreciate all of your help designing and working with us to build out this important module.
Well, it's a great product. It ended up being designed really well. So we use it often. I use it as often as I use the other modules. So thanks for putting it together at a request, and you came through. So thank you very much.